Hello everyone, welcome to the show. So today we're going to be going through Resume Best Practices Part 2, and I think this is one of the more important ones. We'll be talking a little bit about what we talked about the last time in the resume review part, but if you have questions or comments during the show, feel free to ask them or post them later and I'll get to them as I always do. So if you don't know who I am, I'm Kurt Schmidt. I'm president and partner at Foundry. You can check us out at foundrymakes.com, and we're also hiring. We're looking for developers. So if you know anybody or you're interested in working for an amazing agency with some amazing people, of course, I'm biased, but what are you going to say? What are you going to do? Okay, so without further ado, let's jump right into talking about resumes part 2. So the idea, again, as we talked about in the last episode, is resumes are your marketing tool. They are for you to market yourself to employers. So I've got a quick presentation to go through today. It won't take too long, but I'm definitely excited to show you what I've learned in the past 20 years of being a part of hiring a lot of people. So resumes. Again, if you don't know, my name's Kurt. I'm president of Foundry, and we are a custom software and design and development agency located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. One of the reasons why I'm doing this is because it's an estimated that 26 million Americans are estimated to be unemployed or claiming unemployment, and it's a terrible time. So I'm trying to do my best to help folks out who are either looking to find that next job or even trying to maybe level up their career. A lot of people this year kind of planned maybe earlier on in the year to make a move and found they were kind of stuck. So here's some ways that we can work on getting to at least our resumes to a better spot. So resumes best practices part 2. What are we going to talk about today? Well, one of the things that we're going to be really focusing on is taking credit for your work. One thing that people are notoriously bad at is taking credit for their work. And some people are worse at it than others. But to be honest, I see it in resume after resume after resume where people just kind of list out the things that they did at the job, but don't talk about the impact that their work had. So let's talk a little bit about what we want to review today. So we're going to do a quick review of the experience formula, which I talked about in the last episode about how to write about your experience. We're also going to talk about debunking myths and so-called research, and I'm using air quotes. Actually, I'm using real quotes here, but research that I've read about, and there's a big difference between people doing the research and the people actually doing the hiring, so we're going to talk about that. And then the last is talking about your summary or your profile and storytelling around those items. So let's jump right in. So the formula for experience that we talked about is, a skill or verb, accomplished what by doing what resulted in what. So basically, what did you do? How did you do it? And what was accomplished? And then what was the impact or result that benefited the organization or a team or something, right? So this is where a lot of people get stuck, is how do I come up with that last part, that statistic, right? So I wanted to touch on that just a little bit more. So let's say you're a product manager or a project manager and you launched a really big project and that was it. Like the project launched, and I've talked to a number of project managers or product people that have a big release, and they're like, well, yeah, I was just doing my job. So I released software. Okay, great. But what was the impact of that software? How many customers did that impact? How many people on your project, on your team, were you managing as a project manager? How many hours was the project, or how many sprints was it? Try to go back and think about those stats. And that's an important part that I'm going to be covering in a future interview, is about how to gather and accumulate that stuff while you're working, because we don't want to be thinking about this stuff unless it's absolutely necessary. When it's kind of too late and we need to be looking for a job and we're out of work. So let's move on to resume myths. So one of the biggest myths that I hear about all the time is the one-page resume. I just want to clear up, there is no rules to the length of what a resume should be. Yes, it's true. There's been research done that's saying hiring managers will only spend a few seconds initially reviewing the resume. But the thing is that if your resume has a great story, It won't matter how long the story is. I mean, if the story's really good, people will read it. But that first few seconds, what I think is missing in the research that people are doing is people are really viewing that formatting, the formatting of the resume. They'll only spend a few seconds because they're not actually reading it. They're looking at it to see, can I digest this? So let me repeat that. If I get a resume and I pull it up and I open it, I'm going to review it quickly to see how much investment is this going to take for me to read this. You do the same thing when you pick up a book, a magazine, anything, or even when you go to an article on a website. If it looks like it's a long scroll, you're going to reevaluate how much time you have to invest in consuming that content. So the same thing happens with a hiring manager. If you get a resume and it's formatted poorly, let's say there's no margins, the sentences are huge, the text is too tiny. It's there, and we'll go through in future episodes what a good format is. But think about the formatting. Is it clean? Is there a lot of good white space that allows for a comfortable reading experience for that hiring manager? And if they look at it and they say, "Yep, this looks comfortable," I will, give them the attitude of like, I can take time to review it now, or I'll come back to this one because it looks consumable. It looks easier for me to go through. So if it is easier to go through, it doesn't matter if it's 1 page or 3 pages. It's just, it looks easier to consume and to get the content that they're looking for. So moving on, too many buzzwords. So as we've talked about in before, is people say, don't use too many buzzwords. I would say that's correct. Don't use words just because they are within the industry. But if they are part of the job description, if they are part of the job posting that people have, you want to be using those buzzwords. And again, this is nomenclature, people. So buzzwords, industry terms, acronyms, whatever the case may be. To some people, they're buzzwords. To other people, they're keywords. So really for you, what you need to be focused on is making sure that you are accurately using the same language in your resume that they're using in those systems. Now, if you are using something or if you're applying for a place that's a much larger company that might have an ATS or an applicant tracking system, then yeah, you want to have the keywords in there for sure, and you want to have them in there a few times. But again, if we're applying directly to a company, maybe it's more of a medium-sized business, maybe less than 1,000 employees, then it doesn't really matter. Like, you want to really focus on that story you're telling, and hopefully the keywords that you have with that are helping you tell that story. Next, storytelling. So this goes back again to our formula. We want to take credit for our work. We want to be the hero of our own story. So if you're struggling, and this is where people really struggle, is being able to tell their own story. So one trick I've used in the past is obviously going back to former colleagues and asking them, what was something you remember working about me? What was something you liked working about with me? Hey, do you remember that project we worked on? Do you remember how many customers had that? Hey, you worked in marketing or in analytics. Do you remember how many people downloaded that ebook or something that we did? And then another good way to get those stories is to ask for recommendations on LinkedIn. I've talked about recommendations before and why they're important on LinkedIn. LinkedIn does, they don't advertise this, but they do use it as a way to kind of add weight to your resume or to your profile on LinkedIn. It'll make you found in searches more. It's just better content because those recommendations are really important. They're votes of confidence from other users. So you definitely want to focus on those. And then if you're really struggling and if you really want to dive into the storytelling part, there's a great book called Story Brand, and I'll let you just Google it yourself. It's not just a great book for individuals, but it's a great book for businesses in general. It's a great way, and it has a great format for telling you how to write a story. How to write a story professionally, and you can use the pieces and the worksheets that are in there to kind of help you even go through each kind of section of your resume and tell the best story you can. So again, if you're struggling with the idea, you don't feel like a good storyteller, don't worry about it. Go and get some help. Read a book like Story Brand. It's a great way to kind of move into learning how to write better about yourself. And honestly, it'll just help you in so many other ways. I read the book a long time ago, and I recommend it to a ton of people. The last point I want to talk about is show that you are human. So let's see things on your resumes like hobbies, volunteerism, side hustles. Are you in a weekend heavy metal cover band? Don't be afraid to show how much of a culture fit you are for the company that you're applying for. And sure, maybe you don't know exactly what those people are into. Maybe they are more of a 90s rap sort of company. I don't know. And then they don't like your heavy metal cover band. It doesn't matter. The point is that what we want to show people is that that you are not just a person that is looking to be a cog in a wheel, but you're looking to be a value add to their organization. And that value add doesn't come from just the work that you're doing. It comes from the person you are being and how you're showing up to work. So you'll see in a lot more cases these days, and I see it all the time, especially in more modern interview sort of processes, is that first interview is more of a cultural interview. They're going to see, are you a jerk? Will you work well with the team? On paper, you look fine. Yep, you've got this kind of experience, or maybe you've only got some of the experience. But how do we add to kind of level ourselves up against other potential candidates? Well, one of the biggest easy ways to do that is to show what you do outside of work, the things that make you the person that you are when you show up to work. And those things are important for organizations as they are focused on flattening the sort of matrix in organizations, as they're looking to have people that they love to use self-starters, right? Well, what's better than a self-starter with a side eBay hustle? Or somebody who plays in an orchestra on the weekends, or a noise band with their friends on Tuesday nights. Those are people that show initiative. Those are people that people want in their organizations. At Foundry, we specifically look for people with side hustles. I think it's a great thing that they bring to the organization, not just from attitude sort of wise, but just what they add to the culture. So those are the top things that I wanted to go through today. I want to go back through, these at another time. We'll go through them in a higher level, but I wanted to give you the kind of the foundations for part 2. In part 3, we're going to talk a little bit more, like I said, about that profile, how you're showing up with the formatting of your profile or of your resume, and then how we're adding onto the profile. So again, we'll talk even more depth about how to write your summary or your profile in the next episode as well. But again, part of that is going to come from you talking about your experience. So going through that experience first. A lot of people think that because the summary is at the top, that's where you should start writing. No. You should start with writing out and getting your experience very clear, being able to talk about the impact that you had, then talking about what a human you are, then going back to the top to summarize that. That's why it's a summary. That's why we call it the summary, because it's not the entire piece, but it is a summary of everything you've already written. So the summary and the profile for your LinkedIn page should be the last thing that you have worked on. So again, if people have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Feel free to leave them in the chat, whichever the case may be. But the bottom line is that too many people these days are spending too much time focused on the algorithm side of job searching and job seeking. The networking, the personal connections, asking for recommendations, those are the things that are going to help you stand out from everybody else. So I want to be clear. The reason why the research can be wrong in certain cases is because they're asking the wrong question. They're asking, how long do you look at resumes? Yeah, they look at them for a few seconds, but they don't really ask them why it's only for a few seconds. The other piece is that you have to also understand that when you are going into that interview, a lot of the times the people who are interviewing him, they're only seeing your resume maybe minutes before they start the interview. So again, these are people that are going to quickly digest and say, is this piece of paper or is this PDF going to be of value to me during this interview? They've already passed through the filters. They've already gotten here. Is this going to be of value to me? So they're only going to make